Praise be Jesus and Mary.
Now and forever.
Today we celebrate this feast day of St Mark the Evangelist. And the information that we have about St Mark comes from different historical sources, the early historians of the church, like Eusebius, which has then been passed down and recorded by other saints, such as St Jerome and St Bede the Venerable. And so the tradition is handed down that St Mark was of Jewish origin, that he was of the tribe of Levi. And it's probable that he was converted by St Peter, because as we read in today's first reading, this is from St Peter's first letter, St Peter calls him his son. He says, "The chosen one at Babylon sends you greeting, as does Mark, my son." And so that's St Peter referring to the church at Rome as Babylon. That's because the Roman Empire at the time, like the Babylonian Empire that preceded it, was so great, and also because of the idolatry and vices that were present at Rome. He calls it Babylon. So the chosen one, that is St. Peter himself, from Rome sends greetings, as does Mark, my son. So the term son, we're not understanding as natural son, but as spiritual son. And as St. Paul uses that phrase in his own letters, it refers to somebody who they converted. And so Mark would have heard the preaching of Peter and then received the grace of faith and embraced it, and then also been baptized. So as we read in today's gospel, whoever believes and is baptized will be saved. Whoever does not believe will be condemned. And so St. Mark, he was with St. Peter at Rome, again, as St. Peter says in his first letter. And so he then imbibed the spirit of St. Peter, all of his teaching, his wisdom, as well as his holiness. And so the faithful there wanted from Mark this gospel to write down, put into writing what St. Peter was preaching. And so Eusebius, the church historian, he says that St. Mark wrote his gospel in the year 45 AD, and St. Peter then reviewed that gospel and approved it. And then St. Peter sent Mark off to preach in Aquileia, that's a town in Italy, and then from Aquileia on to Alexandria in Egypt. And so St. Mark founded the church in Alexandria and governed there for 19 years. And so St. Mark would have then imparted his own teaching, which was nothing other than that of Peter, which Peter received from Christ himself, to those first converts in Alexandria. He would have taught them the gospel. He would have been an example for them of how to live the gospel. And in fact, these Christian converts at Alexandria became famous throughout the entire church. They were known to be very holy. Some used the word Essenes to describe them, which means set apart and holy. And it's there that the religious life would really become very famous. That is, those who would live apart as hermits just outside of the city, taking refuge in the desert, and then from there they would gather into communities. It would basically evolve into what we now know as monastic life. And so these first Christians who were so zealous, so holy, so easily and with great docility embraced the gospel, they also become the prototypes for every single religious community out there. Those who profess poverty, chastity, and obedience. Those who are trying to follow Christ more closely. And so all of that attests to the holiness of Mark himself. Not only does this form of religious life take place there at Alexandria in Egypt, but Mark also is considered to be the founder of the Alexandrian school of theology. And so we see the greats that follow him there, like Clement of Alexandria, Origen, and Cyril of Alexandria. So he has all of the credit to which so many holy doctors and bishops, as well as martyrs, come from this church of Alexandria. You can also read about the martyrs of Egypt and Alexandria in Eusebius's church history. So speaking of martyrdom, what about St. Mark's, how he finished his life in this world? We're wearing red. We know that he was martyred. The old Roman martyrology says this: at Alexandria, the birthday into heaven of St. Mark the Evangelist, he, for the faith of Christ, being stretched and bound with cords, was dragged over rocks and grievously tormented. Afterwards, being shut up in prison, he was first comforted by an angelic vision, and at last by the appearance of the Lord himself, by whom he was called to the heavenly kingdom in the 8th year of Nero. And so after St. Mark's death, his body would eventually be moved by merchants from Alexandria to Venice. This was in the 9th century. And so since then, St. Mark has been venerated in Venice with the utmost veneration and reverence by the people of Venice. So much so that the government there has as their insignia a lion, which is, of course, the symbol of St. Mark and his gospel. And the words on the coat of arms say, Pax tibi Marce, Evangelista meus. That is, peace to you, Mark, my evangelist. And so let's honor St. Mark today on his feast day, not only by invoking him and asking for his intercession, but by embracing the gospel that he preached and striving to imitate his holiness of life. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.